Hi, and welcome to my director's commentary and critique. I was going to do this originally as a group discussion with my crew, my first AD, Fletch, and my director of photography, Flynn, but they couldn't agree on anything other than the fact that they loved the rough cut and could care less about this version, which means you're just going to get me. So, guys, I love you, but it's time for you to go. If by chance you're wondering about Osborne Digital Media, I'm the principal and founder, and the name comes from my birth name, which was Osborne. My dad died before I was 3, and when I was 9, my mom remarried, and my stepdad adopted me, making the name change official. Just as a side note, for anyone that has lost a parent, it is the defining moment in that child. I'm in my 60s, and it's still an event that guides my life. Okay, the idea for this film came from reading the book, Writing the Short Film, by Pat Cooper and Ken Dancier. One of the short films discussed was written and directed by Philip Messina, who was an NYU film student back in the 60s. He wrote and directed Going to Work in the Morning from Brooklyn, 1967. The film won awards for its technical prowess, but what attracted me was the premise of the story. It tells the story of a man who struggles to get out of bed in the morning. He gets a shower and eventually gets on the subway to go to work. Both a comedy and a drama. The film is no longer available to see, so what motivated me was the story concept. I began to think about what it's like to go to work during the pandemic, and then Joe Biden's phrase stuck in my head. It's going to be a dark winter. And I thought, what is it like to go to work in the dark winter? Both my wife and I have worked from home during the pandemic, so we have some experience. During the lockdown, it was a drudgery since we basically woke up and got ready to walk from bedroom A to bedroom B, with bedroom B being the office. This is how I came up with the concept and then developed the script. For the opening title sequence, I did not want to give away the film title, but I did want to set a mood of medical despair, juxtaposed against Biden's words. I decided to grab an actual speech from the White House website. I only used a portion of the speech, and then I reordered the sequence of his paragraphs in post in order to provide the context to the film in the title sequence, basically giving you the backstory as the film begins. The opening title pictures were found on the Creative Commons site Pixabay using a long-tail keyword search for pandemic work pictures. Even with the long-tail search, I reviewed several hundred images. Gave me a headache. And for the ones I selected, I adjusted the color and the transparency in post to add more suspense and an industrial feel. I created the titles in Keynote because I wanted custom animation, and I was pressed on time. Otherwise, I would have used Adobe After Effects. And I felt the droplet transition lent to the feeling of despair as time was slipping away, one drop at a time during the pandemic. Okay, brings us to the opening bedroom scene, and this is pretty typical. I researched waking up sequences, and from the shots I found online, pieced together a sequence for this film. This scene establishes the mood for the film through the lighting design and also the music selection, which I'll talk more about later. The lighting throughout 90% of the film is dark and suspenseful. In most instances, I used a low key light in order to maximize shadows, and where appropriate, I used a practical light. To shoot the first scene, there were several setups that were needed. For the main coverage shot, the camera was set at the foot of the bed, and for the over-the-shoulder shot, we kept the camera in the same place, but moved the actor to the foot. For the extreme close-up of the face, the actor, Brian Bennett, was actually laying on the floor with the camera overhead, and our key light was placed in a sandbag cradle on the floor as well. Okay, for this shot, the key light was actually placed in the ensuite, and for the shot of the phone falling, the camera was placed also in the ensuite. Makes sense. I wanted to add this shot to the sequence because it is something I have personally done. I have literally grabbed the phone and then dropped it onto the floor as I was waking up. Thankfully, I've never stepped on it. Before I talk about the next scene, the exercise scene, let me talk a little bit about the soundtrack. I knew from the start I wanted a sound that was dark, and I auditioned close to 100 tracks and ultimately found 2 that I thought would work. I used the royalty-free music available in the YouTube Creator Suite, and also a track from Adobe for which I had to buy the license. I liked my choice for the first few scenes, yet when I watched the exercise scene, I knew for sure this was a great fit. You will too. I chose both songs from the Creator Studio because they were dark and they had a mechanized feel to the melody, which I thought coincided with pulling yourself up every morning and going through the drudgery of the day. Even the second song has a dark industrial feel to it, as you'll see. One more word on the lighting. My hope was to give the picture a noir feel, and in retrospect, I think the exercise scene and also the kitchen scene exemplify this best, especially with the long shadows in the exercise room. An interesting note about the exercise scene: to give as much reality as possible, the actor, Brian Bennett, was sprayed with a water bottle to give the impression of an exhaustive workout. Well, by the time we were done shooting, the water bottle was empty and Brian was pretty well soaked. During the fine edit, I inserted title cards showing the time. I thought they would help reinforce the drudgery and the regimentation of the day's morning tasks. One note about the location and the shooting schedule. The location was my house and the shooting schedule was during the day, which meant I had to block out the windows. I did this from the outside with black poster board from Walgreens and a couple of 2x4 pieces of lumber. The shower scene helps to propel Bob through his day, and essentially it's the next logical step in getting ready to go to work. In one sense, it is ironic because, as we know, he never leaves his house. All right, so let me discuss the choice and character names. I chose Bob in honor of Disney's Incredibles, which was a 2004 film. Mr. Incredible's name is Bob, and he is frustrated with his day-to-day existence working for a normal organization. It seemed that Bob Incredible and Bob in my film would share this similar frustration. Okay, let's go back to the shower scene. For the shower scene, I did not want to show what takes place inside. I felt it was better to just suggest that this was nothing out of the ordinary. Now, in post, I zoomed in on the shower head in between Bob's bathroom appearances. I felt that the zoom, along with the music, added to the suspense of the overall film. Lighting this scene was difficult inside the bathroom, and I ended up cradling my key light on a towel on the sink counter out of the camera sightline. The window was blocked with black poster board, and it turned out to be just enough light to give me the look I wanted. So when Bob exits, the key light was moved closer to the camera, and that's how we lit that scene. When planning shots for the breakfast scene, I knew I wanted an extreme close-up of the eggs cracking. The first song ends with a classic note sequence, and rather than going into another song, I decided the audience should listen to the sizzle of the eggs cooking. And I pushed in on the egg still photo during post-production, basically giving it a Ken Burns effect. Well, there are many elements of the kitchen scene that I like. Truthfully, I was too focused on the story and not the visual story when I created my shot list. There were several close-ups and shallow depth of field shots that would have significantly added to this film. In particular, the gloving up, masking up, and I gotta watch myself, goggling up. Yes, I did say goggling and not Googling up. Overall, the lighting came out great. I used a practical and then a key light for Bob's back that was placed down the hall towards the front door. For the shot where Bob takes the trash out, everything was reset and the key light was placed next to the camera. The second song, which starts with this scene, continues with that dark, pounding industrial theme. Okay, the sign on the door for personal protective gear was placed because as I was researching, and I came upon the National Ad Council website, which had numerous COVID posters available for the workplace. So I thought, in the home, the workplace poster would probably end up being a Post-it note. So using the PPP to go outside was a characterization of many people that felt that masks were needed even out in the fresh air. In fact, I was thinking of a meme from the Babylon Bee that Yellowstone National Park had issued a mask mandate for all the buffalo on property. This is why I had him going outside with all the gear. Finally, Bob's journey to work is complete. He has arrived at his office, and in order to have room enough for background separation, I had to use the dining room where I set up a makeshift desk. The camera was actually set in the kitchen, and I shot through the doorway into the dining room for this scene. Using this area of the house also allowed us enough room to change the setup for the over-the-shoulder shot, which was achieved by moving Bob and the desk as forward as possible. He was pushed right up against the doorway threshold with the kitchen. The motivation for the scene is that Bob can think of nothing else other than being outside, even when he is forced mentally to return to work because of a phone call from his boss. His thoughts are sunshine and the beach. Well, this scene ends when Bob's frustration reaches a pinnacle and he pushes away from the desk and leaves work. Now, the real story to this scene is the fact that it took numerous takes because we needed to get the timing down in order for the voiceover to then fit into the film. And we couldn't just say the voiceover because we needed to record Bob's actual voice as well. So we got it down to timing, and Brian, the actor, and myself, we counted in between his lines, and I would give him a visual cue as to when he should say the next line. Consequently, his lines didn't always match up to the script, but they came out just fine anyway. And the next scene is outside in the brilliant sunlight. To capture this scene, I worked with the weather and scheduling the evening golden hour as my house sits due east and west. One challenge, though, was that it was winter and the shadows were very long. And in post, I had to push the zoom a little to take my shadow and the camera rig's shadow out of the frame. I probably could have planned that better. I wanted to show the trash that had been taken out earlier still sitting on the curb. I thought the lonely trash bag was symbolic of the loneliness and isolation that Bob is feeling through the pandemic. As I look at the finished film, I'm thinking that I should have planned an alternate shot of the trash, one that showed days and weeks of trash piled up in front of the house. To be honest, I'm not sure that I would have used that shot, but it would have been nice to have it available, and be able to consider which of the two would have been the better shot. At any rate, the camera then pans to the front of the house. All right, let me tell you, one of my next purchases will be to upgrade my tripod and head. My pans are not fluid, no matter how many times I practice the shot. And the legs on the Manfrotto tripod have fallen apart numerous times. It's amazing how necessity can develop you into a decent mechanic. All right, the pan shot in the film is not where I want it, but it was the best out of the many taken. As the shots piled up, the improvements became marginal and actually incrementally diminished. And eventually, the last few shots were worse than when I started. The last shot of the film was supposed to be Bob looking out the window at the brilliant sunshine. It was to be shot from outside the house. As I was thinking about this shot, I was also thinking about the scene in The Graduate where Benjamin, Dustin Hoffman's character, is banging on the narthex glass in the church to stop the wedding. It was that feeling of looking at something that you can't have. However, I decided to end on a still picture from the reverse angle looking out into the sun, a sun so bright it washes out Bob, and the picture basically becomes overexposed, suggesting that the sunlight outside is even more brilliant than one might expect. Well, as I was working on the closing credits, I decided rather than ending with statistics, which I had thought about, I would end with a poem. The poem was Whispers in the Darkness. And I chose to bookend the music once again by using Leonard's theme. I hope you've enjoyed this commentary and critique of going to work in the dark winter. I'm John Roneski. Look who is back to take a bow. Wow! Fletch and Flynn, we want to say thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And again, we are Osborne Digital Media.
It's just not my song.